It seems like most of the conversations that we had were with organizations who had innovation baked into the culture already, whether or not they had an ongoing hackathons program. And I do think that that's an interesting thing to call out.
Ideas, by definition, are always fragile.
No tolerance for failure, no innovation.
The best ideas have to win.
This is the Synthesized Pod from Bright Idea. It's your weekly hit of insights and actionable strategies for innovation-minded professionals that just want to get shit done. Welcome to Season 1, Just Say Hackathon.
Hey, everyone. We are back. How you doing, Margaret?
I'm doing just fine today. How are you?
Pretty good. You're on the road somewhere?
I am. I'm in Austin, Texas, actually learning a lot about innovation in the distribution space. So perfect timing for us to have this conversation too.
Very cool. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in and subscribing. We decided that we've come to the end of our first season of Just Say Hackathon, and we basically thought we'd do a little recap for you and talk about some of the salient bits that we remember and maybe talk about where we go from here.
Yeah, and honestly, looking through these conversations we've had to kind of prep for this episode, we were recording and, I knew we had some great conversations, but seeing them all in one space of all of these incredible folks that we've talked to in these conversations has been really cool to look back on.
There's such a cross section, right? I mean, that's what I think is really cool. I mean, I think Jordan really kind of caught the passion and Kfir really had the kind of the strategic macro view. And, I love Liz, in the details. I think I got a little caught up in people's backstory at times because it was so fascinating to me. But yeah, it's just been an awesome arc and, a lot of surprises along the way.
But I think to be in that role, you have to be an interesting human being, right? Like you have to have had some interesting backstory to make it so that you're passionate about innovation, passionate about the future, passionate about doing something different. And so it makes sense that we were enthralled with these folks' backstories because you have to be an interesting person in order to be in this role.
I agree. There's no, I remember when I first started out, at the time, there was no master's degree in innovation management or something like that, right? It was just people who kind of found their way to these roles, and it's always a slightly different path.
Well, and I think we saw that a lot, right? We saw a lot of backstories that people kind of found or fell or got tapped into that role rather than it being a clear career path for them. And so, but I even think that makes sense because to be innovative and to be creative, you have to be able to have enough data points from different areas of your life or different things you've seen that you link together, right? I think that's what creativity is taking different learnings and different ideas from different places and seeing if you can smash it together in a way that actually makes sense and is useful for a business.
I think, people always say live in the moment and it's this philosophical, enlightenment guru thing, but
if you figure out how to do that, let me know.
Well, to me, living in the moment is not about living in the millisecond. It's just not living a decade ago or a decade in the future. And in innovation, it's about really understanding what's changed, right? It's if we were talking before we started about how companies are now creating their own white label credit cards and stuff like that. And that wasn't possible 10 years ago. So if you're stuck in what was possible 10 years ago, you never think about oh, we could just create our own white label credit card and make that part of our solution. So I think to me, in terms of innovation, that's what living in the moment means is what has changed over the past, 10, 3, 1 year and years. And how do I reconceptualize what we do to bring that in? And
a conversation that I even had yesterday was this, I think there's the fear to do that is often based on the ego, right? What would it mean for me and my role if it changes, right? If this new technology gets adopted or we start to play around with this, and then what am I out of a job and my day-to-day changes and my daily flows change, and all of that can be so scary that I think that's that resistance to change is definitely based in this kind of ego-mindedness.
One of my favorite quotes actually is that I'm gonna mangle it, but it's basically it's hard to get someone to understand something whose paycheck depends on them not understanding it. And it seems like this trite little, throwaway statement, but it's like actually like deeply profound. Like it's hard to get someone to embrace a new model or a new technology. I mean, obviously, I think we've talked about it over the course of this season, is like you see the self-driving Ubers, and it's pretty clear that there's not going to be, that job may be going away. And it's just hard for people to there's like a cognitive dissonance that sets in, that they can't really see the writing on the wall in some cases.
Yeah, in some ways, it's almost like innovation is counter to how human brains really want to work, right? They want safety, they want predictability, they want consistency. And innovation pretty much thumbs its nose at that and says, we're going to be totally different, right? And it's so funny that we as human beings are able to have both kind of systems in our brains, that desire for comfort and stasis and stability, but yet this also desire to create a new future.
Yeah, people talk back in the early days of the internet, they talked about we were creating this human brain, or this like global brain. And what I always thought about is like, oh, there must be some like new idea area of that global brain. It's not the whole brain, but there's some area of it that, just like we have, I don't know if it's an area or a network or something, but something creates these new ideas in our minds, that push and pull of like, hey, I'm comfortable in my pattern. I'm comfortable, driving to work the same way every day. And then the need to like, oh, there's a detour today. I got to like figure out a new way and like switch on a whole new different part of my brain to still get to work on time.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, you kind of look back and reflect, Margaret, what things jumped out at you? What moments were memorable from the first season?
I think definitely, without going into individual episodes, I think we talked a little bit about like the background of these folks, but I think the characters that we met were quite entertaining. Jordan from Rocket Mortgage was one that I think back on that conversation and just think about how brightly his personality shone through and how much he was really letting us understand who he was, and not just the job and the role that he did. His own creativity was imbued throughout his entire life. And so that one I thought was an exceptional episode.
If you don't love what you're doing, you should quit and go do that. So I did that. Like, I quit. I left. I called my wife. I said, I'm going to give the band another shot. She's like, what are you talking about? Dan just said, if you don't love what you're doing, you should quit and go do it.
As I look back, one of the things that you pointed out along the way as a team that kind of developed was this concept of how much structured work you have to do to create unstructured space. And it's sort of this counterintuitive thing, right? It was like, we were talking to Karina, comes to mind, from talking about Dell and their global hackathon and how they launch, in every time zone at the same time, and they have checklists. And, you could tell it was this massive project management exercise, and probably, some of the most structured work she does all year. And yet it was just to create a platform where then people could get out of their structure and like open up and consider new things.
In preparations, we obviously come up with the themes. We try to break those down into smaller pieces, which will be clearer for all participants if they need to. We also have pre-hackathon education sessions.
I think it was really, a keen insight on your part to kind of see that theme emerging through a bunch of the different episodes.
And that's why it makes the role of that person like such a unicorn, because they have to also be able to play in both of those spaces. They also have to have the ability to manage process change internally and get executive alignment and do event management and all of the complexities and the like crisis planning when things go wrong in events and stuff like that. And then also be able to be a leader where they're talking about innovation and describing how this works and being a champion and a student of it. And so I think that's what makes these folks so incredible, is that they're not just only innovators and obsessed with innovation, but also they like have this like systems framework in the back of their brain, and they have to use both of those things to create this experience that then like the magic of innovation comes out of these hackathon programs.
Yeah, agreed. And I think what I'm also hearing is that there's a growing recognition that we need more of this unstructured space. And therefore probably more of these, unicorn folks that you're talking about. Like I said, it's counterintuitive that you have to be so structured. You have to worry about the budget and return on investment and all these, kind of operationally minded, business minded things just to create that base for people to play for a little bit. Because I think a new idea is almost like it's like a seed, right? It needs to take root, and if it's just sitting on concrete, it's not gonna put its roots down. It's nice if the soil is sort of soft and tilled and the roots can find their way down. And I think to create that, area of soft soil is a lot of work. You kind of have this like rigid box around it that like creates the area of soft soil for the seeds to take root.
Yeah, I never really did anything with it, but I wrote like a little bit of a like kid's story a while ago about good ideas. And I love that you were talking about like needs the soft soil to put its roots down, and in and of itself isn't actually going to do anything. It needs to actually, get into the organization and grow. But I think the other thing that I really like about good ideas is they're never the first one out, and they tend to hide in a crowd of bad ideas. And so what you need to do is honestly start inviting the bad ideas out and giving them a space, right? And that's why I think the unstructured bit is so important and then outside of your day-to-day, because if you're just like, I'm going to sit down and have a good idea right now, that good idea is not sneaking out. It's not going to be the first one out, and it's not going to be like showing itself as a good idea. You have to like create that little environment to welcome all of the bad ideas too, in order to then get that little shy good idea to actually work its way out.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in my own experience, when ideas start popping out, the first ones that are, they're not very deep, they're not very profound, they're basically not very, controversial or different, right? Like it's not, in Silicon Valley, they have this saying, you have to be non-consensus and right, so you have to be, you have to do something no one else thinks is a good idea and be right about it, and not be a crazy person. So I think that those first ideas are like, because you're connected with everyone else, and the first ideas are just kind of commodity standard, what ideas anyone would have, and then you kind of have to peel those off and for me, it helps to write them down, get them so my brain's not trying to remember them, and then I can go deeper and deeper into the bigger ideas or maybe the more divergent or more non-consensus ideas.
Yeah, and then you got to pick which one of those you think is right.
And may the best idea win. Let's get into it. Any specific moments? Any specific podcasts that or individuals that jumped out?
I think again, every single one of these conversations with these different companies and these really interesting folks, I was like, I have not even been thinking about that. And so I'm thinking about Giovanna, and when we were talking with her, she's from Amtrak.
For example, the 3D printing team. That's a team that already exists in Amtrak, has nothing to do with us at all, but we made the connection. A lot of our train parts are no longer available to make their original manufacturers, and so they'll go out to the field and get the parts and then scan them to be fabricated.
And my mind started to like actually really like explore the complexities of Amtrak, right? And the big machines that they have and the ability for them to now 3D scan these parts that maybe aren't being manufactured anymore. And also the complexity of being both having to like own the land that these stations are on, but then also, make sure that the trains are running and so many of these conversations, I was like, wow, like the 3M conversation, I was like, haven't really thought about 3M products in a while. And now I get to go down a rabbit hole of, materials and physical product design. There were so many of those that I was just like, wow, really haven't thought about that industry before. And now I'm going to really let myself explore. I felt like my mind was opening, and they're then thinking about innovating that industry. And I'm like, I'm flabbergasted at the fact that is something that somebody thinks about all the time.
I was working really quite in a lab, like truly, you put the adhesive underneath a thing, you smush it, you see how smushy it is, you see what happens when you like turn it, you see what happens, like how long it'll hold. Truly a lab setting.
Yeah, it's funny. Keeping the trains running on time is like a metaphor for, day-to-day operations, right? It's like common, idiom. And yet they're trying to think about how to do it differently tomorrow. I love the story about like the track, the train that like just like monitors the track, or like, basically analyzes the track. And, it's like, of course, after you think about it, you're like, yeah, of course you need that. But like, if you never thought about it, you're like,
never thought about how do they make sure that the track is safe enough for that train to drive on before the train drives on it,
Yeah, exactly. And they've been upgrading their digital experiences, ticketing and, mobile apps, and they've been upgrading the actual train. So it's like multiple layers of innovation that they're doing. And, candidly, probably 20 years ago, people were probably grumbling like, oh, Amtrak, blah, 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 and I think they really have had a rebirth there, a renaissance there it's been kind of fun to watch from the outside.
Yeah. You think of the layers of customer experience and how customers like to buy things, including travel, to the actual physical experience of being on the train and what that would need to be different and changing expectations to the actual machines themselves and the tracks and that. So yeah, definitely one of those things where I was just like, now I'm going to sit here for the rest of the day. And every time I see an Amtrak train, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole.
And of course, I love the name of their hackathon, the Amtrakathon.
So good. It's so good.
One of the other ones I really liked was Pritesh. Like, I mean, what a stellar person. He just comes across as like, a sterling character.
Hackathon is not driven by regular motivational aspects that comes with the job. Hackathon are driven by passion. Hackathon are driven by emotions.
But I just loved when he was just talking through, kind of how hard all this was for him, and like, staying up, not sleeping for 2 to 3 days because there was someone in another time zone who had a support ticket, and the hackathon has this like fixed period of time. So like you have to, kind of get back to people ASAP. Otherwise, like, they get discouraged, and, you waste that little window of time that you work so hard to create.
Yeah, I think that you could definitely tell that he took it very seriously, his responsibility to facilitate this time for folks to be unencumbered and do their best work. And I think that's a huge lesson, right? To be a little bit of this servant leader who is going to, because you care about innovation and innovative ideas so much, that you are going to do everything possible to create that space for somebody to be able to spend it without thinking about their blockers and the logistics of it, or, when's the food going to arrive? I'm starving. Like, to be able to really like nurture and serve these folks and give them the space to do it. I think that's a really beautiful thing, but it obviously is a lot of work and a lot of emotions to get that right.
Yeah. And I also love that kind of seriousness translates to almost like rituals where like he was talking about like, oh, like we have these t-shirts, but like not everyone gets a t-shirt. And
we were very clear that we were not allowed on the t-shirt distribution list because we did not participate.
And it wasn't even like you had to go to the hackathon. You actually had to like do a project and submit it for evaluation. And he's like, so I think it's great that, different organizations create these sort of rituals that it just kind of ups the ante a little bit, right? It just, shows that they're taking it seriously, and that it's a point of pride, and it's an important thing to not just show up, but to actually like get a project, through and ready for the judges.
Yeah, well, I think if you think about culture and specifically groups that you feel a sense of belonging to, you do think about those rituals, but also the what you wear can signal whether part of you're in or not and make you feel like you belong to it or not. And so I think it was really smart to have not just the ritual of the hackathon itself, but also like, and when we're in the trenches together and we do this, now we all can signal to each other on other days that we were part of this really special experience. And yeah, I think about that a lot, like the food we eat, the clothes we wear, all of the different rituals in our life and how it kind of can signal to others that, we did this together and we belong, and how valuable that is, especially in an organization and a culture as you're building it, to have those experiences and to invest in them so that folks can really feel a sense of purpose and belonging in the work that they do.
I think t-shirt is, back in the day, people used to say, IBM was a white shirt and a blue tie, right? And a blue suit, white shirt, and blue tie. And I think a lot of that's morphed over the past 30 or 40 years. It's kind of cool that even something as simple as a T-shirt can have the company's brand on it, but it can also have this hackathon, and it's a T-shirt. It's not, you're not getting dressed up to the nines like you might at a conference or something, or it's letting a little of that informality creep back in. And, to me, that's another signal that we're not just shipping the same business model we've been shipping for the past 50 years, but it's like, we're in the lab, we're in the workshop, we're kind of figuring stuff out, and it's a little bit messy. But this is part of our brand too, right? Yes, we're a global corporation, but this kind of roll up your sleeves, tinkering thing is part of our brand as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think looping that together, I know in a lot of these episodes, we did talk about how hackathons can really change or help enforce culture. You might have to fact check me on this, but it seems like most of the conversations that we had were with organizations who had innovation baked into the culture already, whether or not they had an ongoing hackathons program. And I do think that that's an interesting thing to call out, of whether or not it's an organization that inherently has this baked into a core value or a core competency, or if it is an organization that maybe recognizes that they're not as innovative or they haven't been focused on it, and having to then try to start an innovation program and hackathons program from it. And so I feel like the majority of the conversations that we had were kind of like innovative by nature companies that then were reinforcing it with this program. But I don't know. What do you think about the difference between the two? I mean, I imagine it's much harder if you're trying to jumpstart innovation in a company that hasn't previously thought about it or previously focused on it.
Yeah, it's definitely two mindsets. I mean, I spoke with a company just last week, and they were like, we've been doing hackathons for 15 years, twice a year. We got 30 hackathons under our belt. We know, we've been there, done that. We know how this all works. And then a couple of years ago, we worked with another company where out of the gate, they were doing their first ever hackathon. It had like CEO level visibility. An email was going to go out to 40,000 people. And, all eyes were kind of on this thing. And so I think they're definitely different, archetypes, if you will. One is like, I know what I'm doing. It's a lot of work. Please help me with that work. And then the other is like, I kind of know what I want to do, but, it'd be great to kind of not make, common mistakes and kind of avoid common pitfalls and just have someone to like bounce ideas off of or kind of interpret kind of standard best practice, for our specific company. So I think both exist. I think, obviously we skewed for the podcast with people who have a little bit more experience because they were going to have more insights than somebody who was, just, about to run their first event. I think there's something there for both of those groups, one on the one hand, letting people have done this before and you can do it too. And it's actionable. And the other hand is like, you've got this well-oiled machine and you're trying to like continually refine it so you can do it at a broader scale.
Yeah. Well, and I even think back to when we were talking about starting this podcast and you were telling me all about the conference, the Synthesize conference that you used to run. It feels very much like this is what we would have done too, right? You pull out the superstars that have the experience and you invite people to listen in to learn from them. And I think that's exciting that we were able to do that in kind of a more distributed way with the podcast, rather than making people fly and carve out time from their work schedules to go to a different place. And they got to just sneak peek in on these folks that have vast experience in both innovation and hackathons.
Yeah, the reception's been amazing. I get notes and messages from people that I was on a road trip and I listened to your podcast and it's really good and I'm waiting for the next one, or I don't know, I see you guys in my LinkedIn feed, all the time, and I love the little short snippets and stuff. So it's been really awesome to see the community just kind of pipe up. We basically got more other companies say, we want to talk about our hackathons, or we want to be on the podcast. So all of that is welcome. Please keep the feedback coming. It sort of energizes us. And obviously it takes a little bit of work on our part. We're going to probably take a rest here for a few weeks and regroup and think about what our theme's going to be for the next one. But thanks to all the listeners and subscribers. If you haven't subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and so that you make sure you get all the latest episodes and Also, we really appreciate if you're getting something out of this, if you find it valuable, please please forward an episode on. YouTube links are really easy to just kind of forward over to somebody and kind of grow the community that way, so that we can continue reaching more and more people. That reminds me of one of my favorite creative thinkers, a guy by the name of Peter Thiel. I think he's one of the most kind of independent-minded thinkers that I know of today. And he's been talking about AI recently, and AI is obviously a theme that's come up over the course of this whole season. And one of the things he said, and he always has a kind of a contrarian view that says, everyone else is wrong and I'm right, but he doesn't say it like that. But that's what he's basically saying. But he basically says, like, everyone's focused on artificial super intelligence, right? Like more intelligent than any individual on Earth, more intelligent than all individuals on Earth combined. So he's like, everyone's focused there. When's that going to happen? He's like, I think people miss the point that, like, we passed the Turing test. And, for those who don't know, the Turing test is when a computer can basically convince a human that it's a human, right? It can talk to a human being like it's a human being. And what Thiel was saying is, like, once you pass that test, then it's almost like an internet moment. He's basically saying there's going to be 20 years of transformation post that, like we've had with the internet. It took about 20 years from, like, it's when it first surged to, like, it's kind of fully deployed through society. So he's saying it's almost a distraction to be worried about when is superintelligence going to come. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But he's like, the fact that you pass this Turing test, that, like, basically any job whose primary role is talking to people, customer support, sales, etc., at some point over the next 20 years is going to be transformed in some way. And I mean, if by definition, the Turing test is the person who's talking to the computer doesn't know it's a computer. So if you could go, check on the status of your auto insurance without having to call a person, but you could just, talk to a computer and you thought it was a person, that's a big deal. So he basically is saying, like, you're going to see a similar pattern that we saw with the internet of, initial spike of technology trigger, and then kind of a 20-year adoption cycle where we're just figuring out all the use cases, all the things that need to be transformed now that this new capability exists. And I think that's really, really, important, because in the context of hackathons, it's a tool for trying out those solutions, right? It's a tool for exploring those things that need to be transformed. And if you work in a call center, you're kind of doing the grind every day. Like, you may not have time to think about what new technologies are going to transform your world. So the hackathon basically gives you an opportunity to play with those things and to feel them out and to see how relevant they are for a particular business, particular department, particular function. And, we're basically looking at 20 years of that's going to happen as we roll out all this new AI capabilities. So I think it makes sense that AI was kind of a recurring theme over this first season. So it's been really interesting to hear what, Pritesh is doing with AI at Lookout, and what Amtrak is doing, and what, Ben and Everett are doing at Advent. It makes sense that AI is kind of a theme, and I think it's going to be a theme for a long time to come. When I think about the Advent episode, I think about, like, it as, like, I don't know, they seem to get, like, the soul of innovation right, or the soul of hackathons right. I can't remember exactly what Ben was saying, but, like, I just felt like they got the vibes right, like, and they understood that it was their job to create those vibes.
Just the act of doing it has a lot of value. You don't want to be performative, but, like, just doing things can make things better within an organization. You don't have to change the world to have an impact. So managing that so you don't get discouraged is really, really important.
I also really loved bringing in Caitlin from Bright Idea into the conversation too, after we interviewed a couple customers and had some outside perspectives to talk about her own innovation, team background, and what she was bringing to Bright Idea and our customers was really, I thought, a fun perspective.
Yeah, I think she's got that deep history in, like, kind of design thinking, ethnography. She's not going to let that go, right? She's not going to, there's this temptation to, like, design a product on the whiteboard and be like, what do you think? Or what do I think? And it's like, we're just, in some room somewhere. And she's like, no, like we're going to go talk to real customers and we're going to, like tease out, not always build exactly what they say, but like, hear what the problems are and then kind of reconceptualize or recontextualize the challenges. And I think she's got a really good, every iteration of the hackathon tool, like just seems to get better and better. And I think, and she's doing things that from what I can tell, no other platforms are doing in terms of, like onboarding or integrating like a whiteboard and a project room and a workflow and in addition to all the crowdsourcing and all that stuff.
When you're developing a solution for somebody, you're taking their insights, like you're their therapist, you're hearing their pain point, and then you're trying to tell them how you can fix it. And you might be even 3 degrees off, and that's going to feel just like viscerally wrong.
It's cool to see her not just, be such a stickler for keeping the customer front and center, but also translating that into the product, and the product just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, I think that baked in empathy that she has for the end user, having been part of that community and being part of that community, I think we say it so often, right, in B2B SaaS of you got to listen to your customer, you got to understand what their pain points are, you got to understand if it works for them, talk to them, And it can feel a little trite sometimes to hear that message over and over, but it is. Unfortunately, the reason that it's said over and over is because it is rare. So I loved hearing her point of view in that episode.
Yeah, and she's obviously Midwest humble pie, but she's doing some pretty amazing stuff, and has been super helpful with the podcast as well in the background. So helping us track down some of these customers and all that stuff. So shout out to her. And then also Matt and Veronica, I thought were really interesting. It's one thing to be in one organization and see how they do their annual hackathon, but you look at a team that's maybe seen hundreds, if been involved indirectly in like thousands of these hackathons. Like you really get to see some patterns emerge and some common ways to succeed, common ways to fail, and then Matt trying to codify some of that stuff.
One of the values that we're seeing too with hackathons is there's something produced at the end. And so there's a kind of almost a design thinking principle of show, don't tell. You're not talking about what something could be. You actually have things that people can react. And it's almost a cascading effect on how that can inspire other thinking.
And talk about just being able to pick up that they're coworkers that really like working together. Like, it was one of those where I'm like, oh, yeah, you guys, this is not just 2 coworkers joining a call to, do the thing that they both agreed to. Like, we can tell that you guys work well together and like actually are interested in, in each other's lives. And definitely that's goal for working relationships, I would say.
Yeah, I love that they go and like, basically use their vacation days to go fly to each other and go do a bike race together.
Super cool.
Yeah, Veronica is a bit of a performance athlete, and I think that's actually good training sometimes for some of these marathon projects that she works on, because there are times where you just gotta put in the work, and there's really no way around it. And she has that kind of sixth and seventh gear that she can just kind of kick it into overdrive for a little bit. She probably needs some downtime between projects, but she definitely has that extra gear when it's needed.
There's a skill set of being comfortable with the fact that it's about to be uncomfortable for a period of time and still sticking with it. That is a really, really good skill set to have.
So I really liked the session with Kafir and BlackRock. Curious what your thoughts were on that.
I definitely think that his engineering background was extensive and very interesting. And even this idea of linear and nonlinear systems, he just like casually mentioned it. And then later on after that, I went down a Wikipedia rabbit hole around this idea of trying to influence non-linear systems, things that are essentially kind of baked into chaos, real world kind of stuff, and all of the different ways that we can almost manipulate and even the different methods to be able to look at those systems and to play around with different optionality in them. Like that was one that definitely inspired me to go deep into some internet rabbit holes afterwards.
We were basically designing 75% of the tier 4 data centers in the world. So basically our clients, they were top 5 into every industry that you can think about it. So telecommunication industry, financial industry, hyperscaler starting to get built at the time. Beside Google, everybody was our client.
I was kind of bummed that we didn't have as much time with him. He's obviously a busy executive at a very important company, but it just seemed like as he was talking, there were like these different branches and threads that I wanted to go down for a long time. And you know, he was talking about like, you know, growing up in a basically a communist system and then being in Israel and then coming to the US and doing data centers at the time of, you know, the .com stuff, and that kind of introducing him to like, even if you have the technology right, if the financial markets and the kind of the broader economy is not, you know, if the winds are shifting there, you have to take that into account. And then, I mean, just it was cool to like talk to someone who's like been on the inside of keeping one of these like massive data centers humming, right? Like, cause they're, you know, that's like, you know, people talk about 5.9 reliability, right? Like 99.999. To have that mindset where it's like these things can never go down, right? Like we can't have like our trading system or something, you know, not be online 24/7, but then also be like we have to improve and evolve. And you know, he was talking about like you know, first $100 servers, that goal, and then shifting to Docker and virtualization. It's just mind blowing. I mean, it's the classic metaphor is, how do you fly the plane and replace the engines at 50,000 feet? And I think he's, you know, that's basically his every day is that, right? They're constantly in, you know, transformation of their architecture, but they also just need to be, you know, 100% reliable. Seemed like the right type of person for that kind of job, right? You know, it seemed like, you know, he was, you know, super smart, super serious, but also could kind of, you know, stay light on his feet, which was cool.
Yeah. And I think it's funny. A lot of people use that metaphor of, you know, rebuilding engines or flying the plane as you're building it. And I feel like the majority of the organizations that use that metaphor of that's what this feels like right now don't have dire consequences of certain technological systems that if they fail, you would be in trouble. And so, yeah, to think about the added layer of necessity for things to not go wrong is also mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean,
my mind just all season long, I was just sitting over there being like, wow, I thought I knew a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff, but this season humbled me.
But yeah, it's again, another unique pathway, another unique individual. And then I think to live in that environment, deal with that stress, you know, perform, deliver, make things happen. And then, you know, at kind of the peak of your career to be asked to take on innovation, right? To ask to take on this transformation. So it's nice to know that the systems exist to find those people and get them into the roles where they're most needed, because you know, that doesn't seem like an easy job by any stretch of the imagination.
No, and to your point, to have all of the roles and responsibilities and stress, and then to be able to find the time and creative space to think about innovation, I think is pretty remarkable. And what do they have, that like mug where it's like Beyonce has the same 24 hours that you do?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
how am I spending my hours, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I definitely feel that way with Elon Musk. It's like not only is he, you know, getting into tussles on Twitter, but then you see like in the feed, you see like the rockets blasting off and stuff like that. You're like, well, you know, he's also doing some good stuff on the side. Yeah, I guess that's it. I mean, it's been an amazing season, Margaret. Thank you for being such a great co-host and helping me stay on track when I need to be kept on track.
Keeping the trains on time.
Like I said, I think the community has been super receptive, and both from people wanting more, wanting different things, and then also other you know, innovation professionals that kind of want to get in front of this community. So I think we're going to take at least a few weeks to gather our bearings and catch up on all the stuff we've been putting off, so we could be producing these podcasts weekly, and then we'll come back. But yeah, it's been a real pleasure, Margaret, and looking forward to the next season.
Yeah, likewise. I feel like this has been a fun brain space for me to stay in and kind of push my own curiosity and my own learning about the world. So thank you for having me, and always happy to be doing it.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Once again, please don't forget to subscribe. This is the Synthesize Pod, and we are signing off for the Just Say Hackathon season, and we'll be back with more tips, tricks, and insights for leaders that are cultivating the innovation mindset in Season 2. Stay tuned.
Thank you for listening to the Synthesize Pod. For more resources on how to bring innovation to the forefront of your organization, sign up for our newsletter at brightidea.com. That's BRIGHTIDEA.com. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.